The Hall of Resonance had been carved from a single slab of moonstone long before humanity had learned how to stack stone into walls. Its ceiling arched so high it seemed to fade into a soft nebular glow, threads of bioluminescent algae tracing ancient constellations across the stone. Every footstep echoed, not as sound alone, but as vibration, felt through bone and nerve by every species present. Princess Aelyra of the Varelian Concord stood at the center of the hall, spine straight, hands folded in the traditional posture of dignified refusal. She had done this 999 times. Each suitor stood where she now faced the 1,000th mark carved into the floor, some engraved, some burned, some etched by plasma or claw or ritual blade. They came from empires that spanned spiral arms, from warrior clans whose names were spoken in fear, from merchant dynasties so wealthy entire planets bent their orbits to please them. And she had refused them all, not out of arrogance, not out of cruelty, but because none of them had asked her the one question that mattered. Behind her, seated upon the triarch dais, the ruling council of Varelia observed in silence. Queen Mother Saratha's eyes glowed faintly silver, her expression carefully neutral. The other triarchs, High Strategist Corwin and Voice of the People Elevar, shifted slightly, already weary. 1,000 refusals had political weight. The Concord needed an alliance. The stars were growing dangerous. The devouring swarm pressed from the outer dark. Old treaties frayed. The Varelian fleet was strong, but even it could not stand alone forever. Aelyra knew all this. She also knew that her hand in union was not merely symbolic. By ancient genetic and psionic law, the consort of a Varelian royal became a living keystone, able to share in command resonance, to anchor fleets, to influence morale across light years. Choosing poorly would doom them all. "Present the final petitioner," Queen Sarath said at last, her voice rippling through the hall. Aelyra closed her eyes briefly. The final petitioner. The 1,000th suitor. The one whose arrival had caused more confusion than fanfare. The doors at the far end of the hall did not slide open with ceremonial grace. They swung wide with a soft mechanical hiss, revealing a figure that made half the gathered nobles lean forward and the other half recoil. He was small. Bipedal, yes. Soft-skinned. No carapace, no fur, no scales. No glowing sigils or visible psionic aura. He wore a dark, simple uniform bearing an unfamiliar insignia, blue and white, stylized stars encircling a single planet. A human. Aelyra had studied the species, of course. Everyone had. Humans were new, loud, and inexplicably persistent. They lacked natural psionics, lacked exoskeletal protection, lacked longevity. And yet they had survived first contact with 3 hostile civilizations and turned 2 of them into allies. The human walked forward alone. No honor guard. No procession. No gifts carried by drones or bonded beasts. Just him. He stopped at the 1,000th mark and bowed, not low, not submissive, but with a strange balance of respect and self-possession. "My name is Elias Morgan," he said, his voice amplified gently by the hall's translation field. "Representative of the Terran Union." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Aelyra studied him carefully. His eyes, brown, warm, alert, met hers without challenge, without hunger, without calculation. "Interesting. You may present your petition," she said, her tone formal, already prepared to refuse. Elias nodded. "I'm here to ask for your hand in union." There it was. Simple.
Direct.
And, Aelyra added, "What do you offer in exchange?" This was the point where suitors boasted, where they spoke of fleets and bloodlines and ancient power, where they promised dominion, protection, reverence. where they spoke of her as a symbol, a prize, a strategic asset. Elias was silent for a moment. Then he asked quietly, "May I ask you a question first, Princess?" The hall went still. That was irregular. Queen Sereth's gaze sharpened. High strategist Corwin's mandibles clicked in irritation. Elira felt something unexpected stir in her chest. "No suitor has asked me a question," she said slowly. "I know," Elias replied. "That's why I wanted to." Elira lifted her chin. "You may ask one." Elias took a breath. "What do you want?" The translation field rendered the words perfectly. For a heartbeat, Elira forgot how to breathe. Images flooded her mind, of suitors speaking over her, of councils deciding for her, of alliances built on her existence rather than her consent, of centuries of tradition pressing her into a shape she had never chosen. She had dreamed of asking that question herself. No one ever had. The triarchs shifted uneasily. This was not how things were done. Elira's voice, when it came, was softer than protocol allowed. "I want a partner," she said, "not a ruler over me, not a subject beneath me. Someone who will stand beside me when the stars burn and argue with me when I am wrong." Elias nodded, as if she had confirmed something he already believed. Then, he said, "That's what I offer. No fleets, no threats, no grandiose vows. Just that." "And what of power?" Queen Sereth demanded, unable to remain silent. "What of war? Of legacy? Humans are fragile, short-lived. What makes you worthy?" Elias turned respectfully toward the dais. "Because we are fragile," he said. "We learned early that we survive by choosing each other, not because of blood, not because of destiny, but because we decide to." He looked back at Elira. "I can't promise I'll never fail you, but I can promise I'll ask what you need before I decide what to do." The hall was silent. Elira felt something inside her settle, like a lock clicking open. For the first time, she did not feel like an offering. She felt like a choice. "I refuse," she said. Gasps erupted. Elias did not flinch. Elira raised her voice. "I refuse the traditions that would bind me without consent. I refuse the notion that power alone makes a worthy union. I refuse the 1,000 suitors who saw only a crown and not the one who wears it." She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "And I accept the human who asked me what I wanted." Shock turned to uproar. Queen Sereth rose slowly from the dais. Her gaze moved between her daughter and the human, unreadable. "The laws," Corwin began. "The laws were written to protect the Concord," Sereth interrupted, "not to strangle it." She descended the dais, stopping before Elias. "Human," she said. "Do you understand what you accept? The devouring swarm will test you. The galaxy will watch you. You may die long before my daughter ages a single decade." Elias met her gaze. "Humans are very good at living fast," he said gently, "and at making the time count." Queen Sereth studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to Elira. "For 1,000 refusals," she said, "you have been patient. For one answer, you have been brave." She lifted her staff and struck it once against the floor. "The union is recognized." The hall erupted, not in protest, but in something rarer. Hope. The first test came sooner than anyone expected. 3 standard cycles later, the devouring swarm breached the outer defense ring of the Concord. Entire systems went dark in hours. Even seasoned admirals faltered as psychics static drowned command channels. Elira stood on the bridge of the flagship Radiant Accord, her mind linked to the fleet through resonance. Beside her stood Elias, clad now in Concord command attire, still human, still fragile, but unyielding. "The swarm adapts to our formations," an officer reported. "They anticipate our strikes." Elira felt the pressure. Billions of lives, thousands of ships, all depending on her. Elias leaned closer. "May I?" She hesitated, then nodded. He stepped to the command console. "Humans don't outthink enemies like this," he said. "We out-improvise them." He issued a single order, breaking formation, scattering the fleet into seemingly chaotic vectors. The Varelian officers stared in horror. Then the swarm faltered. They could not predict what refused to be orderly. Human-led squadrons baited, feinted, sacrificed ground to win space. Varelian resonance amplified morale instead of precision. Together, they turned disaster into victory. When the battle ended, the swarm retreating into the dark, the fleet erupted in unified resonance, something that had not been felt in generations. Elira looked at Elias, awe softening into something warmer. "You risked everything," she said. He shrugged. "That's kind of our thing." Years later, far fewer for Elias than for her, Elira stood once more in the Hall of Resonance. This time, she was not refusing. She held his hand as the Concord recognized what history would remember not as a political union, but as a turning point. The moment the stars learned that strength was not found in dominance, but in choosing each other, again and again, no matter how fragile the choice might seem. She had refused 1,000 suitors, because she had been waiting for one human to ask the right question, and change the galaxy with the answer. The years that followed were remembered as the turning age. Historians would later argue whether the galaxy changed because of the war against the devouring swarm, or because a single princess chose a human. Those who lived through it knew the truth. The war merely revealed what that choice had already set in motion. Elias Morgan did not live long by Varelian standards. That fact had haunted the council from the moment the union was declared. Queen Sereth herself had once confronted Elira in private, asking, without accusation, without ceremony, whether she feared the pain that would come. Elira had answered honestly, "Yes, every day." But fear had never been a reason to refuse life. Elias aged as humans did. His hair silvered while Elira's skin remained luminous. Lines formed at the corners of his eyes while hers did not. Where she measured time in decades, he measured it in moments. And he filled every one of them. He argued with her in council chambers when admirals grew complacent. He walked among civilians when royalty would have remained distant. He listened to dock workers, to alien refugees, to junior officers who believed their voices did not matter, especially to her. When the Concord faced decisions that would once have defaulted to dominance, Elias asked the same question that had once stunned a hall of ancient stone. What do we want to become? Under their shared leadership, alliances replaced vassal states. The Terran Union brought its chaotic adaptability. The Varelians brought their resonance and stability. Together, they forged a coalition that did not rely on fear to survive. The devouring swarm never returned. Some claimed it was because the fleets grew too strong. Others believed the swarm, an intelligence built on predation, simply could not comprehend a civilization that refused to fracture under pressure. On a quiet world overlooking a pale blue sea, Elias finally began to slow. There were no grand halls, no council witnesses, just Elira, seated beside him beneath an open sky, the stars reflected in the water beyond. "You know," he said softly, voice thin but steady, 1,000 suitors is still a ridiculous number. She smiled, her hand tightening around his. "I was very stubborn." "No," he replied. "You were patient." Silence stretched comfortably between them. "Did I change your answer?" he asked. Elira leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. "No," she said. You changed the question. When Elias passed, the Concord mourned, not with ritual obligation, but with genuine grief. Fleets across 3 spiral arms dimmed their lights. Humans held vigils beside species that had once dismissed them as insignificant. And Lyra endured, not because she was immortal, but because she had learned something humans understood better than most. Love was not measured by how long it lasted. It was measured by how deeply it changed you. Centuries later, when young nobles asked why the Concord no longer demanded royal unions of power, Lyra would tell them a story. Not of a human hero, not of a great war, not even of love. She told them about a question. About a princess who refused 1,000 suitors because none of them asked who she was. And about one fragile human who did. The galaxy had never been the same since.